crisis, conflict, and friction. It's a potent cycle as the Sun, Earth, and lunar nodes are in the same gates. Beware entering into a new experience unless it's truly correct for you, according to your strategy and authority. The transit field is really pushing for change. Do it, do it, do it. And the continuation of heightened emotionality. All part of this cycle of the human design weather for March 12th to 18th, 2025. Hello there. I'm Margot Fraser, your guide through the cosmic weather. As a certified human design professional and intuitive coach, I'm on a mission to help you know, live, and love the magic of your true nature. In this podcast, Human Design Weather or Not, we explore the conditioning influences of the planetary motions, the transit field. You can't avoid the conditioning pressures. You'll likely notice their effects playing out around you, but rather than you reacting and being pulled off track, this awareness will empower you to navigate the cycles, staying true to your authentic nature and taking advantage of opportunities when correct for you. All right, let's get into this cycle. This cycle begins March 12th at 5:11 p.m. and goes until March 18th at 8:46 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Universal time coordinates, that's March 12th at 11:11 a.m. until March 18th at 2:46 p.m. Remember to convert that to your own time zone so that you know when it starts and ends for you. We always start with the Sun-Earth activations because that's 70% of the conditioning field. As I mentioned in the intro, it's a very potent weather cycle as the Sun-Earth moves into gates 36 and 6, the traits of crisis and conflict in the emotional center, the solar plexus center, which are the same gates that the nodes of the moon have been activating since January 30th. So giving a really big exclamation points after those particular traits. All right, let's start with the Sun. It's moved into gate 36, the trait of crisis, the darkening of the light. This is part of the collective, abstract, experiential circuitry, which brings a theme of making sense of our experiences and then sharing them, and it's impersonal sharing. There's no opportunity to make sense of an experience and of human existence itself if you don't go through cycles of experiences. The motor of the emotional center directed at the throat means that this is a trait of action. It brings the pressure for change and to enter into a new experience, to do it. It's emotional, so in the wave of hope to pain, there can be a movement from, okay, I'm ready, I can do this, with an enthusiasm, to the other side, which is, I don't think I'm ready. I don't know if I can do it, and you can be kind of dreading it. The keynote for this trait is the rule of cycles, in which decline is a natural but not enduring stage. So we're talking cycles here, beginnings, middles, ends. No part is meant to be enduring. If you don't have experience, that's going to be a limitation that you bump up against, right? So for example, it's one of the first questions that you're asked when you want a new job. Tell us about your experience. The limitation of not having the experience is the decline. It's natural. We all have things that we don't have experience in. But if it's something that's truly correct for you to get experience in, you can. The limitation can be dissolved. So again, it's not enduring. It doesn't last forever. This trait is rooted in having that determination to face the limitations of not having the experience and persevering in moving through them. In the polarity, there could also be a general resistance to change, resistance to getting experience. That can be fine if it's really not for you anyways, according to your strategy and authority, but just having a general resistance so that you're holding back from entering something that is correct for you. Well, that's going to bring its own kind of crisis. There can be an awareness here that getting experience can also change relationships. For example, if you're in a ground floor entry level position in a job and you have camaraderie with the others that are working around you in the same position, then with experience, you get promoted to manager. Well, that's going to shift relationships, which can bring another level of crisis, another cycle of needing to go from inexperience to experience in the new role. We all make mistakes when we're in the learning process, so there can be a sense of inadequacy that you might feel with this particular activation. So very, very strong pressure to enter into an experience. If it is correct for you, this is really going to support you to go through it and learn from it. If it's not correct for you according to your strategy and authority, it could end up being very frustrating, and you could end up feeling like you're stuck. Remember, too, that there are two rules of thumb for the experiential circuitry. The first, no expectations. When it's correct, you just have to surrender to it for whatever it brings. The second is one experience at a time. You're not going to get the depth of the wisdom if you're dividing your energy between different experiences. All right. The Earth. The Earth has moved into gate 6, the trait of friction and conflict. Also in that solar plexus, emotional center. This is a tribal trait, which always has an underlying theme of mutual support. You do this for me, I do that for you. So that's going to have a little emphasis on it in this particular cycle. This is part of the channel of mating, which at a primal level is about making more of us for survival of the species. So it brings a focus on intimacy. At a personal level, this is your one-to-one relationships. It points at gate 59, the trait of sexuality in the sacral center, which is the trait that wants to break down the barriers to intimacy. This gate 6, which we have here, is the one putting up the barriers, seeing if the other, whether that's a sexual partner or friend or business partner, can deal with all the ups and downs of emotions. Is this someone that I really want to partner with? The fact that it's emotional means take your time, as moving through the ups and downs of the wave can create conflict, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The keynote says the fundamental design component of progress, the law that growth cannot exist without friction. If we look at that literally in terms of mating, well, sex doesn't work if there's not friction. If we look at it figuratively, growth in a relationship or creative growth also can't occur without friction. You've got to work through things. We aren't clones of one another. We're going to rub up against things in each other that can create a friction that we have to work through. It can create some conflict. But moving through that conflict, that friction, can allow growth and evolution. But the polarity can be there too. You may find that trying to work through the conflict and the friction, the relationship devolves. For 50% of you that have that solar plexus, that emotional center undefined in your chart, so that triangle on the lower right of the body graph is going to be white. The big not self theme for you is avoiding conflict and confrontation. So the not self mind will say, yeah, we don't want to have any confrontation, no conflict. We don't want to rile up those emotional people. Then we have to deal with all that. Okay. All right. Well, this is a trait that is either open or closed to intimacy. Who are you going to let into your world or not? So there's an association with your boundaries. It's associated biologically with your pH. You may notice with this trait that communication through touch with friends and loved ones is heightened. The potential opportunities this trait brings is to work through conflicts, to open to intimacy, for establishing deeper personal or business relationships. There's a creative fertility that this trait brings. And there's an opportunity to be very emotionally stable through conflict. The cautions, well, the polarity can be there too. So it can bring emotional instability through conflict. Beware of making emotional decisions. When we look at these two traits together, your experiences and the change that they bring can bring conflict to your relationships, for better or worse. The emotional center is where we can bring blaming and shaming, especially where your not self sets expectations that weren't met. The shadow mind, the not self mind, will often look for who or what to blame or shame. And if that's expressed, it's likely to bring a negative type of conflict and confrontation. Remember that these are in the emotional center, so patience is needed to get clarity. And for those of you who are not emotionally defined, you have your own strategy and authority to use to make your decisions. Okay, let's look at the channels that are being created this cycle. When the transit field creates a channel, everyone that doesn't have it already in their chart is receiving the activation of the related traits and qualities. So there's a big impact with that. We have our one long-term channel that came in February and is with us until April 7th. So we've been in these frequencies for over a month now. Jupiter is in that gate 35 position, the trait of progress and change in the throat center that is connecting with its electromagnetic trait of crisis, gate 36 that we were just talking about in the emotional center, being activated by both the sun's position and the north node of the moon. This creates the channel of transitoriness, the design of a jack of all trades. The rule of thumb, again, is never to repeat an experience, but to move from one experience to another, hence the transitoriness. We have the emotional center connecting to the throat center, and the emotional center is both a motor and an awareness center, our emotional awareness. This can be a pushy energy. We could have emotional volatility here. The pressure to enter into a new experience and the crisis of gate 36, feeling inadequate as a novice. There can be no expectations, once again, about what the experience will bring. The potential opportunity, if it's correct for you according to your strategy and authority, is to enter into a new experience or move into the next phase of an experience that you might already be in, or bring it to completion, getting to that gate 35 where you can articulate the change and the progress and how you feel. This can also be the voice of I'm bored. If you've brought something to completion and there's nothing new that's really calling to you, I'm bored. Then it can also be the voice of I feel. And most often, I feel like a change. Now, if you enter into an experience out of the pressure and not your strategy and authority. It can bring frustration, anger, disappointment at those unmet expectations or feeling stuck. That brings us to our long-term transits. The long-term transits are created by the outer planets and the nodes. They're with us for longer periods of time, years in some cases. So your not-self mind could start to think that, ooh, they really are a part of me, even when it's not something that's in your own design. And then it's, whoo, a big shift when that gate activation finally moves on to something else. Right? Where'd it go? What's wrong with me? Right. So as I've discussed, we continue to have that emotionality with that pressure to enter into a new experience through that channel of transitoriness. However, it might not be correct for you. So again, I know I say it so many times, but so important to follow your own strategy and authority. Now, gate 35, that trait of progress and change in the throat, has moved into the third line. So the lines are the number behind the decimal point. There's 6 of them. They represent different forms of expression of that particular trait. And the third line is called collaboration. It has a developmental theme, a learning theme that you gain over time. And what it says is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Yes, that is something that you learn over time. And this is a third line, and third lines always bring a theme of going through trial and error. The exaltation for this particular line says benefic encouragement of others that expands personal as well as communal progress, the ability to bring progressive change into others' lives. The polarity, the detriment, says the need to be the center that ignores the importance of others, the need to be the center for progress. Now, this is Jupiter, so it could be expansion of either end of the polarity here, expansion of the encouragement around change and bringing change that benefits everyone. This is a collective trait, so it's really about humanity as a whole. This is not tribal. It's not just your people. It's all of humanity. In the detriment, there can be an expansion of the ego need to be seen as it's me, I'm the one that's bringing the progress. All right, gate 36 in the sun's position, we'll click through all 6 of its lines through this cycle, while the north node of the moon is in line 6 called justice. And it says the inevitable survival of right. In other words, you correctly enter into the experience, you'll get to the other side. The thing about any 6 line is that it really brings this wanting to know that the experience and the change are really going to lead to something greater, that it's really going to be of value. Otherwise, it can hold back. The exaltation for this trait says the knowledge and attendant faith that the powers of darkness eventually destroy themselves. Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. The correctness of crisis when it arises out of pure feelings. Now, darkness here means ignorance, not knowing. This is what it is when you're a novice, right? You're ignorant, you don't have the experience yet. Madness reigns as long as there is ignorance, that not having the experience and all the wisdom that goes along with it. When entering into it comes from the true and pure feeling, yes, this experience is the correct one for me to enter into. I really want that particular experience, that particular feeling that goes with it. Then there's something transcendent that could potentially come out of it. The detriment for this line says a profound sorrow and cynicism that is not diminished by the understanding that the darkness is self-annihilating. The sorrow or cynicism that comes with seeing that despite the correctness of the feelings, there's always crisis. There's always that next experience. This detriment can be depressive. The questions the not-self mind will be asking is, what if the expectation is never fulfilled? What am I doing on this hamster wheel of life? Oh, there's no point, right? These can be people sometimes. They've got this in their chart that maybe saying the world's coming to an end. All right. Well, gate 6 is it also in line 6, of course, in the nodes. It's called the Peacemaker. It has a learning theme that comes with maturity as well. And that says the discipline and integrity of a superior force to unilaterally cease conflict, to permit surrender and survival of its foe. The exaltation is and says the highest form of reason is that life is sacred. So there's a compassion in the way the peacemaking is done. There's a recognition that life is sacred, and that's reason enough for peace. The polarity, the detriment, says the peacemaker whose actions are just, but whose terms are unacceptable. The emotional power to end conflict, but only after one's conditions have been satisfied. So here we have conditions, and conditions that are difficult for the other to swallow. With this full channel of transitoriness and its pressure for experience at a collective level, okay, going beyond the personal now to the collective level, it's still this pressure for change. But now we get a we behind, right? We need change. We need change. Big change. We're making change for progress. And it will bring conflict and friction. Gate 22 has moved into line 6 also, where it can bring leadership to social situations with its mutative quality, or it could be deeply depressed that it can't see what the mutation's going to bring. This is Saturn. And a lack of discipline in being polite. Gate 22 is the gate of grace or disgrace. So if we don't have that discipline to be polite, to be graceful in interactions, it could bring undesired consequences. Just looking at these gates together in the emotional center, the experiences that you enter into could bring friction, grace, and attentiveness that evolves relationships. Or it could bring conflict in a negative sense, disgrace, and closing off that devolves relationships. Gate 23, Uranus position, the trait of assimilation in the throat, brings a potential unique and unusual expression that could really shift perspectives. However, it's also in line 6, quite a few line 6s here, which means that there could be a reluctance to bring through that expression, that unique expression, unless you can see that it will really have the impact that you want. Will what I know really make a difference? This is part of the individual circuitry. It's a pulse of knowing that can come through it. Neptune sitting in gate 25 in the G center. It's the individual trait of innocence, the spirit of the self, and universal love, or the polarity. It's in line 2, which is called the existentialist. So it's about being here now, no matter what shocks come in. Now, Neptune brings illusion, veiling, lifting the veil. So it could make it difficult to connect to this trait on one hand, to really get a sense and to be here in the now and centered within yourself. This is part of the centering circuit, this gate 25. It could also show us the illusion of looking to the past and future instead of being here now. Pluto in gate 41 is the trait of contraction and decrease, also part of the abstract experiential circuitry. It's the gate of daydreaming and fantasizing about the next experience that you want to have. Also in line 2, which is called caution, and says humanism tempered by pragmatism. You could fantasize here about wanting to help others. This is collective, but not actually take any action. Or you could want others in the polarity to recognize your feelings and your dreams for humanity, receive appreciation for that. There's an expectation that you'll gain something out of that. So a little bit of the ego getting involved there. Remember that for any of these traits, if you don't have them in your own design, it's just pressure from the transit field. You can observe it, you can watch it playing out around you, you can learn from it. But whether there's actually something for you to do with it is according to your own strategy and authority, rather than being run or puppeted by this conditioning field. All right, this brings us to the end of the cosmic weather for this cycle. If you want to run your own chart, you can go to jovianarchive.com. And if you're new to human design and just want to understand the basics of the chart at a very high level, what's the black and the red about, the different geometric shapes, a bit of background on the system, you can grab my free Human Design Basics mini course. It's at margotgfraser.com/human-design. And there's various opportunities for readings there as well if you're wanting to go deeper into your own design. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I would be very grateful if you could give it a like and consider subscribing. All right, so continue to keep those surfboards out to ride these emotional waves. Exceptionally strong pressure to move through a new experience, to make change in your life. So very important to attune to your strategy and authority. Make sure that it's correct for you. For example, if you have a lot of logic circuitry in your design, which is about experimenting, repeating over and over to perfect and develop mastery, you don't want these frequencies running you, right? If you weren't aware, it could just pull you into something new. No, leave that behind. You need to enter into a new experience. Well, that's okay if it really was correct according to your strategy and authority, but otherwise it's going to pull you completely off track. If it's correct for you, wow, what a force to support you in moving through a new experience or getting started on it, bringing maybe a peaceful end to any conflict in a way that's really in integrity. Okay, well, have a great cycle. Be kind to one another, and may you know, love, and live the magic of your true nature. Until next cycle, bye for now.